So I can do, you're here. Hi, everybody on Facebook. I do Facebook and Instagram at the same time. So I was kind of fumbling around with my Instagram tech for a moment there, but I think it's all good. As long as I don't move, everything will be fine. Thank you for being here. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about teaching yoga philosophy, and also I want to talk about the vagal brake. Maybe there's a segue there. Um, Basically, what happens is that people send me questions, and they ask me different things about teaching yoga or about brain science or about yoga philosophy. It's a lot of different questions I get throughout the week. So I'm trying to use this opportunity on Fridays around noon my time. I know there's people that are from many different places. Hi, Dan. Nice that you're here. That are watching, and so 12 o'clock on Fridays is what I'm trying to do consistently. Last week I was teaching at the Mountain Area Health Education Center, so I wasn't able to be here for that live stream, but nobody was here for the live stream. I wasn't able to be here last Friday, but I'll try and be here as consistently as I can. Okay, so to begin with, I want to tell you the question that I got was, how do you incorporate philosophy into your yoga classes? And it's a great question, and one that I started to wrestle with. I started to look into many, many years ago when I started teaching in 1995. Okay, so when I started teaching in 1995, I was living in New Jersey. There were not a lot of yoga studios at that time. I remember going into New York City pretty regularly, to take classes and kind of figure out what people were doing. There was Jivamukti Studio was there, but the one that I was attracted to was the Shivananda Ashram. So I went there a few times, and it was very much like the way that I learned to teach in India. It was like ashram style. Everybody wore baggy clothes. Like there wasn't any spandex. There wasn't any music. It was just sort of this very traditional way of teaching, and it was lovely. And but the yoga trend was starting to pick up, and so I was like cognizant of the fact that different things were happening even where I lived. And I lived in a town that's on the Delaware River. I lived on either side of the river between New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and there was a yoga studio there, and she had studied, the owner was like the first yoga studio I'd ever really seen in my area, and she had studied with Jivamukti in New York, but she also had studied a lot of yoga philosophy. And so I went to her class the first time, and I was like, wow, she knew how to bring yoga philosophy into the class while people were doing asanas. And I thought, that is how I want to teach. I'm going to start figuring out how to share yoga philosophy while I teach, because I loved yoga philosophy so much, and so I started teaching like that. And it actually, people were really interested because I would weave in stories from, the Puranas, or I'd weave in, or the Gita or something, or the Ramayana, or I would bring in some philosophical points from the Yoga Sutras. I would just or the Upanishads, or just bring stuff in that I really liked. And that was a really exciting time to teach, and it was fun for me at that time. And since that time, I've taken some of the yoga philosophy out. What happened was, my husband came to one of my classes. So Brett, my husband, came to one of my classes. It must have been like in 2004 or 2005. And he was like, you talk way too much. I just want to be in the moment and experience my body. I don't need you telling me about yoga philosophy while I'm doing asanas. And I was like, I felt very sad at that time, because I thought, well, that was like what I was so excited about sharing, And then I realized I needed to start my own yoga. I had been teaching in yoga teacher training programs, and I was like, I got to start my own yoga teacher training program, because I got to be able to share this stuff. But what did I want to do in yoga classes, and what did I want my students to get out of them? Yeah, little nuggets or gems of yoga philosophy during yoga classes, I think, are wonderful. And I think that's a great thing to share with people. So if you have a yoga sutra, like if you found a yoga sutra and you're like, oh, that's really speaking to my heart right now, and I've been reading about it in different books, then share that sutra and use it as a theme for your class. You don't have to talk about it the whole time. You can talk about it at the beginning, do some asanas, talk about it a little bit at the end, let people reflect on it a little bit, give them a little homework to take home, like, oh, what would it mean? What would it feel like if you meditated on this yoga philosophical, on this Yoga Sutra and this philosophical principle? Like, what would that feel like to you? So do that sort of stuff. And, you know, in terms of the specific question was like, how do I start? Well, start with the books that you love. Like for me, I love Nischala Joy Devi's book, The Secret Power of Yoga. I love Lauren Roach's book, the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, or I think he calls it the Radiant Sutras. Like those sorts of books are so, and I love the Upanishads, you know, so any Upanishad, but especially the Shvetashvatara. So I'll just take like a little passage sometimes and I'll read that little bit. And it's kind of inspiring, and you don't have to know everything about the difference between dualism and non-dualism. And, you know, you don't have to know all the different, all the different aspects of Indian philosophy. But if there's something that speaks to your heart, that really is a way to take your classes from just being fitness classes to being classes that are really integrated biopsychosocial spiritual model classes. And that's going to speak more to people on a holistic level as opposed to just, you know, being something they do to exercise or to relax. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you can, you know, and I'm happy to talk more about this subject. So feel free to continue sending me and ask me questions. Okay, so let's go from there to the one other topic I wanted to talk about today, which is the vagal brake. And I've blogged about it, and I'm going to put my blog in the, I should have done it already, but I'll put it in Facebook so that you can see on my Facebook page, Subtle Yoga, if you're on Instagram, so that you can read a little bit more about the vagal brake. But this concept really helped me to understand what was going on in my nervous system when I did asanas, and how I could change my autonomic nervous system based on the asanas that I selected and putting them together. So here's the basic concept. Now, when I first started studying the nervous system, my initial thought was, as you inhale, that's going to be energizing, right? That's going to be sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. And actually, I had teachers who said that, you know, and there were, you know, with all due respect, that wasn't entirely accurate because they weren't understanding the vagal brake. So there's that. I thought it was sympathetic activation when you breathe in, and I thought, and also I thought that means back bends and side bends. And, you know, active poses, balance poses are going to be sympathetically, they're going to activate the sympathetic part of the nervous system, right? But actually, and then I thought, okay, and that means, and I was taught this too, that forward folds and twisting poses and restorative poses are going to activate the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, and exhale, right? So all that stuff, that's, you know, it's just neat. It's like inhale, activating poses, sympathetic, exhale, relaxing poses, parasympathetic. It turns out that's not accurate. It turns out, like with everything in brain science, everything changes every few years. We start knowing more nuances. It's much more nuanced than that. It's much more nuanced than that. And the simplest way that I like to explain it, how I understand it now, and I spent a lot of time with my science advisor breaking this stuff down and reading different articles about it, and how I understand it now is this concept, what I like to call the vagal brake, or it's not just me, people call it the vagal brake. And so let's talk about this metaphor. So basically what we know is that the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, the relaxation part of the nervous system, controls the breathing rate, right? And that makes sense because what the science has shown is it almost doesn't matter what pranayama you do, but focusing on your breath tends to take you into parasympathetic activation. Interesting, right? So, and I would probably take out of that equation all of the hyperventilating practices. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about whether it's Nadi Shodhana, ratio breathing, Sitali pranayamas, like that stuff tends to take us, because of the awareness, tends to take us into parasympathetic activation, okay? So the way that we can describe this is with the metaphor of a brake, and you're going down a very long slopey hill when you breathe, basically. And when you inhale, you put your foot on the brake. So you go slower. And when you exhale, you take your foot off the brake and you go faster. And so it's a parasympathetic brake. It's a vagal brake that is guiding oh, sorry, someone's calling me. It's my husband. Okay, sorry, honey, I'll call you back. So the vagal brake is guiding the respiration, which then hooks us into or is intimately entwined with the heart rate. And that's why it's important, right? Because you think sympathetic activation, my heart rate has to go up, right? And then parasympathetic activation, my heart rate has to go down. Inhale, my heart rate goes up. Exhale, my heart goes down. So you think sympathetic, parasympathetic. No, it's not like that. It's all parasympathetic. The heart rate is actually mediated by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is parasympathetic. So what it means is when you're inhaling, the foot comes off the brake. When you're exhaling, the foot goes on the brake. And this has implications. This has many implications in terms of asana practice. And it also has implications in terms of our understanding of how yoga benefits the nervous system, the brain, and our health. It's largely through the parasympathetic activation, which would mean if you're playing with that vagal brake, you're creating more resilience in the nervous system. There's some opportunities to take your foot off. There's some opportunities to put your foot on. You want to do back bends. You want to do forward folds. You want to do inversions. You want to do twists. You want to do side bends. All of those are going to be helpful because they are helping us to increase resilience of the nervous system, right? Expand our capacity for movement. And that's one of the things. This is one of the reasons why yoga postures are so wonderful. You know, if you're a human being who doesn't do yoga, you're sitting down, you're standing up, you know, you're lying down at night. That doesn't give a lot of different options to the vagus nerve in terms of, well, the vagus nerve here. Now it's actually called the baroreflex. But the baroreflex is another piece. I don't want to bite it off today because it's too much, but it's another piece that influences the vagal brake. And so with yoga, we're in all sorts of different positions. We're not just up and down and lying down. We're not just going fast on a treadmill. We're doing all sorts of different things with the body that create different effects on the heart, on the lungs, on the fascia, on the organs, and on the neuroendocrine system, on the immune system. All these different effects, because the function of the autonomic nervous system is to bring you back to neutral. So you take yourself out. It's homeostasis. So you take yourself out in all these different directions, and then your body has to come back to homeostasis, This is really important as to why the yoga practices, why asana practices are so beneficial to the nervous system. I hope this makes sense. Now, I just got a message that says, I got a little lost with the metaphor. The hill we are driving on is the parasympathetic response. Yeah, essentially that's right, Marie. We're going down a hill. Now, this is in terms of the breathing response, right? So, and how it affects the heart. So when you inhale, you expect the heart rate to go up. And when you exhale, you expect the heart rate to go down. And all I'm trying to do here is clarify that that's not entirely sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic has something to do with it, but the immediate effect is via the parasympathetic system, by the vagal nerve. So when you inhale, you're taking the foot off the brake. It's parasympathetic. When you exhale, you're putting the foot on the brake. Now, Matthew said, I'd say inhale is mostly brake with a little gas, and exhale is mostly gas with a little brake. In my humble opinion, it's always both, never one direction. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Matthew. It's certainly more complicated than I'm explaining it, but I'm using this model as an easier way for people to understand that it's not sympathetic and parasympathetic in terms of inhale and exhale, because that's the way it often gets broken down, and it's not accurate. And the sympathetic part of the nervous system, in terms of the way it affects the heart, kicks in later. The parasympathetic is the thing that kicks in first. So, you know, these things are complicated. I have no qualms admitting this is very complicated stuff, and there are many, many layers, particularly what's going on in breathing. You know, there's influence from the stretch receptors that affects the homeostasis coming back from the brain to the heart. So there's There's all sorts of things going on, but this basic concept of the vagal brake was really helpful and revolutionary for me in understanding the difference between the inhale and the exhale and its effect on the heart rate, and how yoga postures, particularly breath-centric practice, the kind of practice that I learned and what I teach, how the yoga postures affect the nervous system. So I hope this is helpful, and certainly open to lots of questions and comments about the topic. We can keep going deeper into it if you like, and I'll be back next week with another live stream. Thank you for being here. Feel free to leave comments or questions, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Namaste.